about trans guidance. And I said on this show, actually, I've got 3 kids. I think this is something parents are massively, massively concerned about and have been waiting for the government to come out with this guidance about how your kids are going to be able to be at school if they're thinking of transitioning. And actually, I've ripped it out. You can't see it, but I've ripped it out of today's Times. There is a really helpful aid memoir for every parent out there. I'd suggest you run out and buy the Times. So say briefly, we're waiting a long time for this, by the way. The government has finally done it. Briefly, schools will have to tell parents if their children either socially transition at school. There is no duty on schools to allow them to socially transition. There is no duty on teachers to use a different pronoun or name for a child. Schools are obliged to maintain single-sex changing rooms, but people who identify as a different gender will be able to play with the gender they identify with, but only in non-contact sports. So this has come out today. Samantha, parents have been waiting for ages for this. Has the government... It's a really, really difficult issue. Has the government got the balance right on this?
I believe they absolutely have. I think that, I mean, as it said, the new parent-first approach is absolutely the key. All too often, I think, especially in recent years, we've seen the government acting as a de facto parent, as you know, as we've said many times, the nanny state. I think that parents have lost a great deal of agency and a great deal of involvement in their own children's lives. And the idea that schools or medical professionals could withhold very important information from their parents just on the basis that their kid doesn't want their parents to know. If there are safeguarding concerns, then parents and then social services get involved. But parents should know what's going on in their kids' lives.
Parents should always know, because the best possible education is a partnership between those amazing teachers and the parents. They shouldn't be keeping any information from each other. And Jonathan, this will help teachers. They have been, before this guidance is out there, they've been in such a difficult position because this is a rapidly changing part of our society. And I think teachers have felt out there on their own, sort of making it up as they go along before this guidance was available.
Well, the one thing I would say is that I don't think, as this article is talking about, sort of teachers fearing losing their jobs if they use the wrong pronouns, I don't think that should ever be on the table. But I think that I completely object and reject the new guidance, because I don't think that we should have a parent-first approach. I think we should have a child-first approach. If children want to feel very strongly about this issue, I think it's incumbent upon people to assist that and to encourage them to be who they are. Now, that also, it's dangerous, for one point, if you are, you know, there might be parents at home who aren't as progressive and understanding, and not necessarily, they might not have a background of abuse.
Let me just pick you up on that there, though, because I think you're absolutely wrong. So we're talking about primary school children, right? So when my kids go into school, if my son takes his inhaler at lunchtime, I think there's a reasonable expectation for me to say the school should tell me as a parent, because when he goes home, I'll check his breathing before he goes to bed or whatever. So you are genuinely saying that this guidance that does allow for some exceptions, but this guidance that says to teachers, if your child socially transitions in primary school and secondary school, but in primary school, parents should be told. You're genuinely saying that that's wrong.
I think it should be up to the child.
It should be up 5 or 6 years old. They are children.
The child. We have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. Having an inhaler is completely different from something social like this. And sorry, just there's a...
Can I just interrupt here and say, first of all, I absolutely object to the fact that the idea that a child in a home where there's no social services involvement, etc., would be at harm because their parents aren't progressive enough. If the school or local authorities believe that a child would be at harm based on any social or political views that might be expressed to their parents, then social services should get involved, because that child clearly is not safe in that home. If that isn't the case, then a child should absolutely not be given these mammoth decisions. A child is a child under the Children's Act 1989. A child is a child until they're 18 years of age, and having been treated as when
Samantha, let me just... Yes. Are you seriously saying that if a 6-year-old child at school wants to socially transition to a different gender and says, don't tell my mum and dad, that those parents shouldn't be told? You can't do that under this guidance. That's why I support it, because it puts parents first. Are you seriously saying that a 6-year-old can make that decision?
I think that if a child is expressing a clear wish not to have their parents told, there might be a reason for that. Sometimes we don't always know best. We don't always... Children sometimes
parents don't know better than a
No, I'm not
six-year-old
saying
child.
that parents don't know. I'm saying that teachers don't necessarily know what's best for people. They don't know what happens behind closed doors. And if children are expressing that wish, there may be a reason for it. Every case should be taken on its merits, Jake. But I think there's also another point here.
Wow.
There's another point. This is not just about the danger, the potential danger of it. It's also about pragmatism. Because if a child is doing something and you doubt that child's intentions or motivations or sincerity or whatever, it's actually quite sensible to kind of to do what that child wants, because there's nothing to then push back against. There's nothing to resist. And see what happens with that child if they still want to do that later on. It's not an irreversible decision. No one's talking about having surgery at 6. It's about pronouns.
Well, all I can say is, thank goodness the government has brought out this new guidance, because under this guidance, I would find out what my 6-year-old child wanted to do at school. I know Jonathan disagrees with me. He's perfectly entitled to his view. That's why we love having him on the show. But thank goodness teachers have to tell parents. Look, in other news, really serious, the Lancashire accent from my hometown of Helmshire in Rosendale, the Lancashire accent is going to die out within just a few generations. And the real key about the Lancashire accent, as somebody who lives there happily, is that it's the way we say R. So we say the letter R as in AR. So if you lived in somewhere like Bacup, a wonderful town in Rosendale, you would say car park, Mars bar, and things like that. And that accent we learn in this article in the Daily Mail is the most traditional English accent. So apparently people who live in Blackburn who speak with a traditional Lancashire accent speak how most people across Britain did historically. Now, I think it's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. We should drop all other stories from the programme. It's a tragedy that the Lancashire accent is going to be lost. Let's unite Lancastrians together and convince the rest of Britain that they should all be saying car park rather than car park. Jonathan, are there any accents you particularly feel passionate about?
I have to say that I enjoy a bit of acting and mimicry, so I enjoy sort of doing different accents and learning about different accents.
What's your best accent?
I'm not.
You've fallen into it here,
I quite enjoy the Northern Ireland accent. And also like a Liverpool accent too. Really enjoy doing that. So different ones. And so I think one of the great things, one of the most interesting things about sort of the English language in England and also across the UK is that we have, for such a small country, we have such extraordinary diversity of accents. But at the same time, you can't force people to speak a certain way. And obviously with mass media, there is slow homogenisation. I don't know what we can do.
It's a much poorer society. It's a much poorer society. We don't want to homogenise the Blackburn or the Rosendale or the Darwin accent. I don't know. Samantha, favourite accent?
Well, although I've been told on many occasions I have the poshest accent in existence, I'm actually from Shropshire and I love a black country accent. My nan, she was a farmer from Church Stretton, my dad's adoptive mother, and she had the most heartwarming black country accent you could ever hear. So I think you should lead the crusade. You should be our Braveheart for bringing back the regional
Rishi,
accents.
if you're watching, I know you haven't given me any job in government, but there could potentially be the dialect and accent czar for Jake Berry. You could send me off around the country. Get rid of me. I won't be in Parliament causing trouble any day. Send me off around the country. I can go to Newcastle and other places I love in the north of England and try and encourage people to speak with their regional accent. And of course, if you have watched that new film of Napoleon, you'll find that apparently everyone in the Napoleonic Wars had an American accent. Who knew? Napoleon from Corsica, who had a thick Corsican accent, really spoke with American accent. Look, we're going to have to move on. I'm sorry. I want to talk about this all show, but we haven't got time. Michael Gove, he's at it again. He's the Housing Secretary who says that we're not building enough houses. Jonathan, is he right to come up with this new guidance that is going to take away control from giving planning permissions from agencies that have delayed by over a year, like the Environment Agency, who might have an objection to it, or in fact, in total from local authorities who don't have an up-to-date local plan? Is Michael Gove on the right track with this?
I think that we have spent so much time talking about housing and no government has come up with the goods, and I include Labour in that. We have simply not replaced the housing stock, the public housing certainly, with the rate that it's been taken out of the public sector. But in general terms, housing has simply not caught up with demand, and that is why we have a massive, massive housing crisis that just doesn't.
Well, surely that's because we've got 750,000 people coming to the country legally every single year as immigrants. If you're only building 300,000 houses a year, you can't keep up with that, can you?
Well, you also have people, so we have a birth rate as well. Look, obviously, no one's going to deny that we have migration that adds to the demand for housing stock because obviously they need to live there. That's not to say that migration is obviously a bad thing. It's a good thing. We need those people to live here, to fund our public, to man our
just
public
not
services.
750,000.
Well, a lot of those people are students, actually, Jake, and they live in halls of residence. So I think we need to be clear about what those figures are.
Samantha, as a younger person, is this something that really you care about? Because, of course, one of the things we hear a lot is young people just say, I'm just never going to be able to own my own home. You're not building enough. They're unaffordable. I'm going to be renting for life. Is this music to your ears from Michael Gove?
I mean, anything that will improve the prospects for younger people to get on the housing ladder is welcome. Although I would say, a new study recently found that England is the worst place in the developed world to find housing. Wow. We are, the 6th largest economy, and yet people are scrounging and struggling to find a basic necessity housing in this country. The fact that I'd like to think I've got good prospects, I have a steady flow of income, and yet the prospect of me owning a house in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years even is slim to none. We've heard of the silent renter generation who have given up on the prospect of ever owning a house because the prospects are just so dire.